Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Joseph Katti from the Marketing Department of UL, and I thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. During this webinar, we'll provide an overview on the global regulatory updates for toys, ISO, EN, and ASTM. Next slide, please. Before we get started, a couple of quick housekeeping items. Material presented during this webinar is based on the best available information as of today, and as standards and regulations continue to evolve, the information included in presentation is subject to change. You all will continue to provide recommendations and consultation to our clients based on the newest and best information available. The information presented is provided by UL for educational and informational purposes only. The company makes no warranties or representations about specific dates, coverage, or application. We recommend that you consult with appropriate legal counsel about the specific application of the law to your business and products. Today's webinar is being conducted under mute conditions. We encourage you to ask questions using the chat window, which is located to the right of your screen. Time permitting, we'll answer those questions in addition to any received during registration. Don't forget to visit ul.com and sign up for complimentary newsletters. Our speaker today is a UL expert. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Elisa Gavazza. Elisa supports UL in the toy technical area with more than 15 years of experience in the industry. She participates in many international working groups and anticipates the needs of toy manufacturers and retailers. She has a wide knowledge of legislation and regulatory requirements applicable to toys at a global level, dealing with both manufacturers and enforcement authorities. It's now my pleasure to turn this broadcast over to Elisa.
Thank you, John, for your introduction. Thank you all for being here today. Let's see the agenda of this webinar. Today we are going to talk about ISO, EN, and the ASTM last published requirements. So for the ISO, we are going to tackle two amendments of the 8124 Part 1, so the physical mechanical requirements. And these two amendments are one related to flying toys, the other one related to various, and we will see which are the main various topics that have been addressed. And the other one is ISO 8124 Part 3, which is related to the migration of certain elements. Then we will go into the details of the last EN published standard. So we are going to talk about 71 Part 2 flammability, 71 Part 4, which is dedicated to experimental sets for chemistry and related activities, EN 71 Part 7 related to finger paints, and EN 62115 that is addressing the safety of electric toys. And then we will dedicate a last slide to briefly discuss the amendment which are not published yet, so these are under discussion for the ASTM F963. Let's see first the amendment of ISO 8124 Part 1, and we are talking about the Amendment 1 that was published in 2020. This amendment, both the number 1 and the number 2, were published in June to include some changes with the scope to align the safety requirement with EN 71 Part 1 and ASTM F963. So, as you know, the ISO is strongly pursuing an alignment strategy for technical requirements and standards. So let's see the modifications related to the terms and definition. Especially, we would like to introduce you to two new terminological entries, the one related to flying toys and the one related to remote controlled flying toys. So for flying toy, the standard intended toy or part of a toy intended to be launched into free fly with an onboard energy source, for example, compressed gas, springs, electricity, or inertial energy that continues to propel the object after the initial release for a part or all of the fly. For a remote control flying toy, this is a toy with a mass of no more than 250 grams, capable of being remotely controlled, for example, with a wireless transmitter. Drones and helicopters are two examples of this category of toys. Let's now go deep into the requirement changes. The chapter 419 has been dedicated to flying toys. So within this standard, there has been a replace rotors and propellers by flying toys in this clause. As far as it takes about the requirement, there is a part related to some general requirements, which are here indicated. So leading edges on rigid parts of flying toys shall not protrude beyond the depth of the gauge, which is represented in figure 54. And then remote controlled flying toys shall be accompanied by instruction that give to the user information on how to use the toy safely. For rotor blades on flying toy, those that present the potential for injury shall minimize the potential of rotating blades to cause eye injury. And in general, as you can see in the pictures in this slide, there are some possibilities, some different possibilities to achieve this requirement. One of them is the design of the toy that should prevent the blades ends to make contact with the eyes. So, for example, there can be a protective ring around the perimeter of the rotor blade, a cage enclosing the rotor blade, or rotor blades are fully enclosed and not accessible. Another possibility is the blades are made of a flexible material that easily bends when a force is applied at the outer end of the blade, perpendicular to the horizontal plane of the blade itself, and that does not break or permanently deform when tested according to the perpendicular tension test for rotor blades. And the blade shall bend without breaking and return approximately to its initial position after the test. Then there is the possibility that the blade ends are clutched or loosely coupled to the rotor so that the ends are not directly powered by the rotor drive, or there can be a partial ring around the perimeter of the rotor blade, or rotor blades are designed so that the leading edges are protected with a resilient material or flexible part. So you can, as you see, reach out this requirement with different designs of your toy. Then another important modification is related to the warning. So chapter 419.2 says that flying toys with rotor blades that might reasonably be able to contact the face and that present potential for injury or their packaging should carry a statement similar to the following warning. That says, warning, always operate the toy away from eyes or face. Again, within chapter 419.3, related to rotor blades on remote controlled flying toys, there are requirements. These requirements do not apply to propellers that normally rotate in the vertical plane. So, for example, a propeller or on an airplane. And in addition to the requirements that were mentioned in point 419.2, rotor blades on remote controlled flying toys shall conform to the following requirements, which are A, the rotor blade edges that could come into contact with the A ball shall be visibly rounded, and B, rotor blades shall not detach when tested according to the tension test for rotor blades. So rotor blades that are designed to be replaceable shall be accompanied by instruction that clearly indicate the steps necessary to remove and securely replace the rotor blades. And for sure, introducing new requirement, also new test methods have been introduced and defined, and these two test methods are in the subclauses 5.24.6.6, which is related to perpendicular tension test for rotor blades, and the 5.24.6.7, which is the tension test for rotor blades. And then we go into the updates related to the second amendment published in 2020, which are indicated as various because they refer to various topics and various requirements. Let's see, for example, some of the new terms and definitions. The one that we are willing to mention here is the new terminological entry related to toy bag. So toy bag is a bag clearly intended for use in play, often having features designed to encourage children to use it in play. Bags that are used solely for storage of the toy or its components are to be considered as packaging, regardless of whether they are attractive to children. So, for example, if they are brightly colored or they have characteristics appealing for the children. Such characteristics alone are not enough to define a bag as a toy bag. Let's look now into some of the main changes related to requirements. There are changes for expanding material, so they are dealt with in paragraph 4.3.2. So toys and component of toys which are expanding material and fit entirely into the small part cylinder shall completely pass through the gauge which is specified in figure X1. And for a toy or component that at the time of purchasing is in an expanded state, the small part size assessment shall be performed when it is in a shrunk state. These requirements are not applicable after testing in accordance with the reasonably foreseeable abuse tests. And other requirements which have been subject to modification is other toys with folding mechanisms. So chapter 4.12.2. Let's say that these toys with the folding mechanism shall have a safety stop or locking device to prevent unexpected or sudden movement or collapse of the toy. The safety stop or locking device shall not become partially or fully disengaged when tested in accordance with the reasonably foreseeable abuse tests, and the toy shall not collapse when tested in accordance with the test method for other toys with folding mechanisms. And then in paragraph 436.1, there is some general requirement that are referred to toys intended to be assembled. So toys intended to be assembled shall be accompanied by assembly instructions with sufficient detail to ensure that the toy is assembled as intended by the manufacturer. And then let's in paragraph 436.2, there are requirements for toys intended to be assembled by a child. So if a toy is intended to be assembled by a child, the requirements in this document applies to each component made available to the child and the assembled toy. So toys such as a construction set where assembling provides a significant part of the play value of the toy shall be evaluated to determine if any potential hazard exists. So for example, projection hazards, projectile hazards or strangulation hazards. And the evaluation is limited to those assemblies depicted on the packaging and or instruction for use together with the toy. So based on the evaluation, assembly that have potential to be hazardous shall be constructed and tested according to the appropriate subclauses of the standard. And then chapter 4.36.3 address toys intended to be assembled by an adult. So if a toy is intended to be assembled by an adult, the requirements in the standard apply only to the assembled toy. Toy intended to be assembled by an adult shall have packaging and instruction that prominently indicate that the article is to be assembled by an adult. Also have assembly instructions that highlight any connections that are important for the safe use of the toy. So for example, connections that prevent failure that may be or cause hazards, and have instructions that include information on the potential hazards resulting from incorrect assembly, if this could reasonably result in the creation of an hazard. And then in chapter 436.4, there are requirements for toys that are intended to be disassembled between uses. So the assembly instruction shall highlight the importance of keeping the instruction for future reference, and any connection that are important for the safe use of the toy should be marked to indicate that the product must not be used without the connection in place. And this is all for the physical mechanical part of ISO 8124. Let's now check which are the changes in the ISO 8124 Part 3, which is related to the migration of certain elements. So this is the chemical standard. The ISO 8124 Part 3 has been published in March 2020, and it incorporates the changes from the Amendment 1 of 2014 and 2 of 2018 related to the ISO 8124 Part 3 of 2010, as well as it contains new changes. So in this slide, we have summarized the main changes to the standard. So there is a separate definition of paper and paperboard. So paper means a sheet formed by irregular intervened cellulose fiber with a mass per unit area of 400 gram meter square or less. And paperboard is more than this 400 gram meter square. And then within the standard, two detailed methods, the method A and the method B, have been defined for removing grease, oil, wax, or similar material on solid form materials intended to leave a trace. And then there is a new Annex C for preparative and analytic procedures involving the analysis of the 8 elements covered by the standard, which are antimony, arsenic, barium, cadmium, chromium, lead, mercury, and selenium, using ECP OES. Let's now go into a different set of changes and amendments, which are those related to Europe. So we are talking about EN standard, and we cannot start with a different standard other than EN 71 Part 2, which is related to flammability. This is published in 2020. And include new requirements which are especially designed and defined for this guy's costume. So EN 71 Part 2 of 2020 is dealing with flammability requirements, and this European standard shall be given the status of national standard either by publication of an identical text or by endorsement at least by June 2021. And any conflicting national standard shall be withdrawn at the latest by December 2021. So it supersedes EN 71 Part 2 2011 plus the amendment A1 2014. Please note that the EN 71 Part 2 2011 plus the amendment of 2014 is still the harmonized standard to the Toy Safety Directive. So at the moment, we are not sure when the EN 71 Part 2 2020 will be harmonized, even though we think this is going probably to happen sooner than later. Let's say that some of the main changes within the new version of the standard is the definition. So, for example, the one of this guy's costume. the fact that has been clarified that disguised costume shall be tested before and after washing. There are different sample preparation. And also there is an annex A3 that clarifies how to classify toys for identification of the applicable requirements. So let's see some of the most important changes in the requirements. The first one is related to paragraph 4.3. So this is the one of toys, disguised costumes, toys intended to be worn by the child in play. This requirement does not apply to separate toys to be worn on the head, which are supplied with a toy disguised costume. We will, over the last slides, refer to some test methods that we will see just in the second part of the presentation referred to EN 71 Part 2. So when tested in accordance with the paragraph 5.5, part of toy disguised costume and toys intended to be worn by children in play, which contain loose stuffing, which would fall out if tested in accordance with the 5.4.1.2, shall not exceed 30 millimeter per second rate of spread of flame, or the test specimen shall self-extinguish. So this requirement does not apply to soft-filled parts, which, when positioned in accordance with 5.5.3, present a maximum unhindered vertical soft-filled height of 150 millimeter or less. For this chapter, when tested in accordance with 5.4, all other toy disguised costumes and toys intended to be worn by a child in play and part thereof shall not exceed 30 millimeter per second rate of spread of flame, or the test specimens shall self-extinguish. So this is for the requirements. Then let's see the test methods. So there is new added chapter 5.4.1.2, and the scope is test define how to create a test specimens from toy disguised costumes. And there is a note that is that toy disguised costumes shall be subject to testing before and after washing, as I was saying at the beginning, and shall be washed in accordance with any care instruction provided by the manufacturer. If there are no care instructions, or an instruction to not wash, or an instruction to cleanse the surface of the toy only, then the toy disguised costume shall be treated in accordance with 5.4.1.1c, which is defining how to wash the disguised costume in this case, so all the labs testing are consistent. In 5.1.2.1, there is some general information for the specimen. So in case of insufficient material, priority shall be given to making combined test specimens taken in the vertical direction rather than full-size or half-size test specimens taken in the horizontal direction. As well, when preparing pieces for a combined test specimens, there is the need to ensure the longer piece is taken in the vertical direction if this is possible, and in any case locate the longer piece in the lower half of the combined test specimens. If a combined test specimen is formed from two pieces of similar size and cut in different directions, the piece from the vertical direction shall be located in the lower half of the combined test specimen. And in the figure 1, there is an indication of the correct orientation of the combined test specimen pieces with both the correct orientation as well as the incorrect orientation. Also has been newly added in chapter 5.4.1.2.1 how to obtain test specimen to choose the correct order. So where possible, there is the need to take a full-size test specimens, but if there is insufficient material, there is the need to make up a combined full test specimens. So when there is insufficient materials also to make a combined up full test specimens, take a half-size test specimens, and if this is not possible, make a combined half test specimen to do the testing. As well, we should obtain test specimens in the following order. So when all test specimens have been taken in accordance with 5.4.1.2.1a, further test specimens are taken in accordance with 5.4.1.2.6. So test specimens that include filling and features, provided that there is obviously sufficient material. And then there is the point C. So when all test specimens have been taken in accordance with 5.4.1.2.1b, further test specimens are taken in accordance with 5.4.1.2.7, which is test specimens of narrow materials, provided that there is sufficient material and the material was not previously prepared according to 5.4.1.2.18 and B. And the point D says that when there is insufficient material to make up a test specimens in accordance to the point A to C, so to the previously point, no test can be performed. So in this way, there are sufficient information to be aligned in the sample preparation, which is for sure a critical stage of this kind of testing. And then there is the clause 5.4.1.2.6, which is related to the test specimens that include filling or features such as seams, trims, and embellishment. So this is specifically for this kind of part of the garment. And you should prepare a full-size test specimens of material that contain filling or features. So for example, paints, appliques, trims, any embellishment, any patchwork material. And the specimen should be vertically oriented seams from a single piece of material with a dimension of at least 610 per 100 millimeter. But if there is insufficient material to prepare a full-size test specimen, you can prepare an half-size test specimens with a dimension of at least 310 per 100 millimeter. The test specimens are only taken in the vertical direction when the toy is in use, and the lower edge of the test specimen to which the test flame will be applied shall be representative of the lowest edge of the costume or the cuff edge of a sleeve. If the lowest edge or sleeve cuff is not an even length, for example zigzagged, then trim the bottom edge to produce a straight edge to aid measurement and testing. If the specimen includes a vertically orientated seam, take the specimen so that the seam will be located approximately in the center of the specimen shoulder, which is specified in point 5.4.2 of the standard. And if the toy disguise costume has to be cut from the test specimen, the filling or feature should be placed approximately in the center of the specimen itself. So this can mean that the trimmed bottom edge of the test specimen is not necessarily the lowest point on the bottom edge of the toy disguise costume. Also, there is the chapter 5.4.1.2.7, which is related to the test specimens of narrow materials. So for materials that cannot be prepared according to the previously described points, cut a single test specimens at least 310 millimeter per 40 millimeter, provided there is sufficient material. So seams, trims, embellishment shall not be included in these specimens, but filling are permitted. And also in the preparation of the specimens, there is the need to cut it with the greater dimension corresponding to the vertical direction when the toy is worn. And this is holding and position of the test specimens. So there are, again, clear figure which demonstrate how to mount the test specimens on the test specimen holder. For narrow material, which are prepared in accordance with 5.4.1.2.7, the test specimen shall be supported in the holder by a stainless steel wire mesh of 18 per 18 plus 4 minus 0 millimeter, grid size with a wire diameter of 1 plus or minus 0.4 millimeter. So the specimens shall be secured under slight tension to avoid creases, waving or curling by suitable means that do not affect ignition or flame spread. So for toy corresponding to 4.2.5 and 4.3, the outside surface of the material when in use shall be positioned with their outer surface uppermost. And also there is the need to attach 100% cotton marker threads and indicated in figure 2A across the specimens at no more than 2 millimeters from the surface of the test specimens with a device to indicate when the marker thread is severed. And in the case of full-size test specimens, there is the need to use marker thread A and C, while for half-size test specimens, there is the need to use marker thread B and C. So if after applying the flame, the specimens fail to ignite, then it means that this material did not ignite. If the test specimen ignites, but the first marker thread is not severed, then it means that the specimen is self-extinguished within 50 millimeters of flame application. If flame occur and the first marker thread is severed and the flame extinguished before severing the second mark thread, then it should be indicated that the sample self-extinguished. Also, other changing related to this EN71 part 2 is related to chapter 5.5, in which the scope has been modified, introducing not only soft-filled toys, but also certain soft-filled part of toys disguise costume. And in chapter 5.5.3, there are the test performance. So there is the need to determine the maximum anhydride soft-filled dimension of the toy, and if it is greater than 150 millimeter, the instruction is to position the toy so that this dimension is vertically orientated in a suitable clamp. So soft-filled toys shall be tested as supplied, including any clothing or cover present within the toy. And if it should be considered more onerous, also with the clothes or cover removed, if the removal can be accomplished without damaging the clothing, cover, or toy. And then another safety standard of the EN71 series that has been subject to modification in 2020 is the EN71 Part 4. So this is related to experimental set for chemistry and related activities. The standard has been published in December 2020. And also for this one, all members of the European Committee for Standardization have to adopt and publish their national standard by June 2021. This has not yet been harmonized to the Safety of Toys Directive like the EN71 Part 2. So actually the EN71 Part 4 2013 is the standard harmonized. There are some changes. One of them is the scope. which has been clarified, especially for combined sets. So, for example, a combination of chemistry set and crystal growing set is not within the scope of the standard. Then also there is a modification, a specification related to food additives and their mixtures. So if they are in compliance with the regulation 1333 of 2018, they are allowed to be supplied if for sure pure food additives or mixtures are not classified as hazardous. As well, in the chemistry sets, non-hazardous food or other household materials, so for example, starch or flour, can be suggested for experiments in the set and mentioned in the instruction, but not supplied. And also the maximum amount of certain chemicals, as well the pictograms that shall be accompanied to those chemicals have been revised. Other modifications of EN 71 Part 4 are related to the closure for child-resistant containers, which shall be in compliance with the EN ISO 8317 of 2015. Also, carbon dioxide generating experimental sets may require high protection, and details of manufacturer or importer has been removed from the requirements on marking on the primary packaging as they are required by the Toy Safety Directive itself. So let's now see which are the main modifications of the EN 71 Part 7, which is related to finger paints. And in this case, the EN 71 Part 7 remain the one dated 2014, but the amendment A3 of 2020 has been added. Let's say that the main modification was to add the clombazole, which is allowed at 0.2% instead of 0.5%. And then there are other minor modifications mainly related to updates of the directives which are mentioned in the EN 71 Part 7. Let's say that these modifications are needed because the current version of the EN 71 Part 7 that is harmonized to the Safety of Toys Directive is associated in the official journal to a note stating that the maximum concentration allowed for the preservative clombazole is 0.2% instead of 0.5. So this recommendation from the Commission shall be absolutely reflected into the standard. And then in 2020, as you know, dealing with the toy safety, a new version of EN/IEC 62115 has been published. This is referred to the safety of electric toys. So let's say that for this standard, there are several changes. Some of them are related to button and coin batteries. So the new requirements have been developed to make them less accessible to protect children from ingestion. And then safety of remote controls supplied with electrical ride-on toys has been improved. Also, some modifications are related to electric toys to be connected to Class 1 requirements. Also supply via USB connection, and important changes have been introduced in the assessment of the LED. But for extensive information on the update of this standard, we recommend you to visit our website and listen to the on-demand webinar Upcoming Toy Safety Trends and Requirement in the EU, which is dealing with the modification of also EN 62115. And then, as last slide of the webinar, we are willing just to, share with you what's going on in the ASTM committee in relation with the F963. Obviously, the standard which is now published is the version of 2017, but the ASTM working group is actually trying to introduce some amendments which are related to expanding materials, phthalates and acoustics mainly. So for the expanded material, the idea is to add a requirement to try to improve the protection of children related to the ingestion of materials that can expand. So actually the intention of the ASTM 963 is to prohibit items that are small enough to be ingested, because they may expand and create blockage in the child's gastrointestinal tract. But since the requirement was introduced in the ASTM, also new products appeared on the market, which are not small part in the as received state, so are outside of the scope of the actual requirement, but are still presenting a risk. So the idea is to cover also these kind of products. In relationship with phthalates, there is now in the ASTM F963 a requirements of phthalates which is obsolete and which is not aligned with the US federal requirement of phthalates, and this is the reason why this amendment is under discussion. And also there are some new amendment regarding acoustics that are willing to modify certain definition and introduce an increasingly level of safety for the children exposed to noises and toys that can emit noises. And this is all for this overview on the main requirements that have been recently published in the field of ISO, EN, and ASTM. So I leave now the floor to Gian to discuss any question that has been maybe received.
Thank you, Elisa, for your great presentation. Now we do have some questions from the audience. And the first question is, are the ISO 8124-1 requirements for flying toys aligned with the EN 71-1?
Yes, thank you for this question. Yes, the requirements are aligned, so this is a good news. What is important to share is that in general ISO is pursuing an alignment of the requirements with EN or ASTM. So in this case, the requirements are aligned. So there is no need to develop a different design. Although, as you know, EN standard is used in Europe, ISO standard is used in other, countries. So usually there is the need to test toys according to both standards, depending on the market in which the toy is sold. But the idea is to avoid to have different design and to introduce the same level of protection of children.
Thanks for the reply. We have another question for you, Elisa. In Europe, when can we expect to have a new list of harmonized standards to the Safety of Toys Directive?
Yes, this is indeed a good question, and for sure this is something we are all waiting for. Probably the actual situation has determined some other priorities for the Commission, but recently during a working group of the notified body, the information that circulated was to expect soon, in a couple of months maximum, the next harmonization of the toy safety standards. But this is something that may depend and may vary based on the priorities of the European Commission, but we hope that in maximum a couple of months we will be able to see a new list of harmonized standards.
Thanks again for the reply. Here's another question. Is it correct to say that the European standard EN 712 includes more severe requirements for flammability now?
Yes, this is, correct, especially because, let's say, we will test more materials thanks to the possibility to create specimens coupling multiple pieces of textile material and of materials that are possibly to be ignited. And the idea behind all the working has been to improve the safety, especially because an accident was reported coming from UK. And so this accident highlighted the fact that improvements were possible, and all workings have been carried out to increase the level of safety and to reduce how much as possible the possibility that new accidents are happening.
Thank you again. That is all the questions we have time for today. If you asked a question that was not answered during the live session, do not worry, you will receive an email response with the answer to a question shortly after this webinar is complete. Next slide, please. I want to be the first to thank Elisa for her presentation, and with that, we will conclude today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.